Think we are. We're good to go. Morning, everybody, or afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are. Welcome to the first of our summer spotlight series. We've got a couple of these today, one this morning and another one this afternoon UK time. We've got quite a number of people, over 100 people registered. So great to see some of you on this one. I know there's lots attending the later one today. So welcome. We are recording this, so we'll put this on the platform if you're a scheme member, but we'll also send you a recording of this later as well. So yeah, welcome. Just in the chat box, just while we're waiting for a couple more people to join. Just let us know where you're from, what school you're from, what area you're from, and we'll have a look at the chat box and just see where you are. This morning, I'm joined by Steve Wade, who's on the call. He's looking at the chat box and he's going to do a little bit for us around fundamental movements as well and how that links to athletic development. We're going to look a little bit of that on the webinar. And I'm also joined by Dan Wilson, who's on the call, one of our senior P advisors, and he's going to look into a little bit more detail about the construction of some of the key stage 2 content around that athletic strand and how we frame it as well beyond the physical. So yeah, just while people are still entering, if you don't know about us, we're obviously beyond the physical. 4 key elements to our work. So we've got a PE scheme of work, digital content that we use and we push out to schools and community-based organisations, both in the UK and internationally. We've got a range of accredited courses that we deliver, including the level 5 PE primary specialism and level 6 subject leadership. We have a PE and sport delivery team that do things like teacher support in the ground, in schools, again, UK and international. And we've also got a consultancy level service as well, where we work with head teachers, senior leaders, and PE leads to really elevate the power of the subject in specific schools or specific areas. So that's what we do. Welcome to the webinar. We've got 3 of these: one today, one next Monday, and then one on a date in June that's escaped me, but I'll get that to you. So we've got 3 coming up, and we're going to touch upon 3 different areas of the curriculum. So that athletics development, we're going to look at striking and fielding next week, and then the final one is going to be around net war games. So we're going to dive into that in a little bit more detail as well. So yeah, a warm welcome. We're going to be probably 30 minutes tops. Hopefully going to give you 3 practical activities to think about, take away, and implement in your settings as well, and give those a go. So yeah, Steve, anything from the chat box before we go? Do you want to welcome anybody specifically, or what areas we're covering? Because I can't see the chat box at the moment.
So we've got the replies so far. We've got Cam and Jamie from Non-Stop Action, as we know well. We've also got Maggie from ACES. Lewis is just nipping out because he hasn't got his sound out. So yeah, welcome to everyone who's replied in the chat box.
Brilliant. So just in the chat box, and Dan, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I know you've been heavily involved in constructing some of the athletics type activities for us. And in the chat box, just feel free to answer this question as well. What are sort of the biggest challenges? You've been teaching for 12, 13 years in primary schools before joining Beyond the Physical. What's some of the biggest challenges you've faced in delivering athletics-based activities, particularly in primary and lower school phase?
Yeah, I think we've got quite a push in terms of what we do and deliver that needs to kind of link heavily to probably what we see in like the real life adult based athletic competitions that are out there. From me and my background at early doors teaching, when I first started, it was very much like indoor sports athletics, and I had to get a team together to win the indoor athletics, and we had to kind of compete, and I needed the fastest runners, I needed the people who could jump the furthest and throw the furthest, and all my drive and effort was on basically who could do the best in those activities, who was the quickest runners, who was my best javelin throwers, and it was very much that my athletics teaching, my lessons were almost just testing, just basically testing, athletic testing what the children were doing, just so I could get a grip over who was the best in what I was doing. So I think that was a big element of what I was doing initially. That was a big failing of the teaching that I was delivering. Things around equipment. If we think traditionally, like, oh, we're going to do some javelin, or we want to do some shot put, or some chest push throwing, or we're going to do some specific sort of areas that they were going to focus on that linked specifically to specific athletic events that they were going to be doing, that we might not have enough foam javelins for everybody, or if we're thinking high school real javelins, we might not have enough shot puts, discuses, and it was that very traditional approach, so that's what it had to look like. I think we're still having a lot of the focus quite heavily on those traditional aspects of athletics. There's not a lot in terms of how we're looking at that problem solving element of using running, jumping, throwing, but not just in a context where we're just going to run the fastest we can, or just going to run for as long as we can, or we're just going to throw for as far as we can. Like, how are we looking at developing trajectory of throw? How we're looking at problem solving? What different types of throws work well at different moments in time, with based on different equipment, etc. So I think a big one for us is that high development of it needs to look like what it looks like in real life of Olympic events or a competition event that we go to, and trying to reframe a little bit around what we do to almost gamify that up a little bit. How can we use these key core elements of fundamental skills, which Steve will bring to life a bit more? Like, how are we going to use them in athletics or athletic-based activities? But how can we see that evolving across a wider spectrum of learning, and not just pigeonhole it into, this is a javelin throwing event, this is all we're going to do today, this is a triple jump, we're going to do triple jump today, and that's it. Now, how can we see that wider development of those skills in action?
Yeah, brilliant. Steve, anything come up in the chat box from anybody on the call about challenges?
Not as yet, no. There'll be nothing in terms of listening to what Dan was saying there. Hopefully that'll spark some thoughts as we go through the content as to what current athletic provision is, but there's nothing in there as yet now.
Yeah, good, brilliant. So if there anything during the call, just feel free to put it in the chat box. But I think from my perspective, Dan, just as you were speaking there, is sort of, and we talk about this a lot beyond the physical, how we bring those messages to life. So I can completely sort of relate to the things you're saying there. But the key thing is for teachers and coaches working in schools, isn't it? Is how we bring this to life. So just in terms of the sort of holistic nature of of delivering this sort of activities, we'll skip past that because you've touched upon that. Just briefly touch upon, because I think one of the big challenges around athletic development from when I taught and when I teach and when I see lessons is there is a massive there is a massive focus on the physical development, that movement side of it, like skill development. It's very skill based. So, in terms of like assessment criteria, Dan, how then do we help teachers and coaches and ourselves sort of look at it in that bigger picture? Because I think we do it well in other areas of the curriculum. I think we look at different areas of the curriculum really well in terms of holistic development, but sometimes athletics can be a little bit of a struggle to do that. So yeah, just a brief oversight really on how we've started to structure that.
Yeah, I think it's just looking at like this element of what we do here in run, jump, throwers that we can utilize. It doesn't need to be, it's pulling the label of athletics away from it. So we're not just, the focus needs to be on running and running for athletics sake, and we're just running in terms of distance running or running in terms of sprint running. But actually we can look at that wider and think, how are we going to develop our running ability, how that's going to look like, yes, in terms of technical elements of what we can do better to run better in certain areas, but even just looking at that solve element there on the screen, like justifying why we might change speeds when we're running, how we might utilize that but that could quite easily link to an athletics event. So if we were looking at distance running, or we're looking at an 800-meter run, you might speak to somebody about how we might look at change. You might want to go quick to start to get out to the front. You might pace yourself and sit further back and build down, increase that speed as the race is going. But absolutely, that could be looking at other elements of games. So within like run, jump, throw, there's a bit of a tag-based game that's looking at running for tagging. But actually, within that game, there might be thinking, there's moments in this game where I can just scope out what's going on. I can just move around. I can walk to a certain space. I can look. I can use my brain to think. I don't need to be running at top speed all the time. And how we can kind of bring that to life. So we're kind of getting the children to think about, look, speed doesn't always, or running doesn't always need to be, I'm just going to run all the time, run at my fastest all the time. Actually, within games that we play, we might be elements of, let's slow down, let's speed up. When is that a good time? When do we need to do that? And then we can bring that to life in different activities and different games. We can push that down into certain athletic-based activities or invasion games-based activities, or whether that fits in, to really get us to think about, yes, the running, the physical element, but also that sort of solving and problem solving element. And then in terms of that connection, that wider look at like, how are we going to support each other, supporting that through that motivation to improve, like think about performance and goal related things that we're going to do. National curriculum states about sort of going our personal best and achieving personal best, evaluating and supporting others, like looking at that wider picture of, actually we can work with each other to get better. We can work with each other to to get our personal best and what we can do to deliver that. But yeah, that wider meaning to not just running for that technical, but how can we utilize that and grow that wider?
Yeah, Bill. So let's have a look at the first game then. And just, I think to frame this first game, really, just be having to think about the holistic side of things as well. So yes, what do you see from a physical, technical perspective? You know, it might be something to do with running tall. It might be something to do with use of the arms, whatever it might be that you're framing this as from a physical perspective. But just try and move beyond that and think about the things Dan's just talked about there. What would be the assessment framework for you as a teacher? So there's a couple of videos here. There's one that's filmed in the lesson with the children, and then there's a little bit of a different example as well, where it's a course we delivered recently internationally, where it just looks at how you might progress this and link this to something really athletic specific. So I'll let this play through, and then we can just pick up a conversation around it.
Today's lesson will be set up in a carousel which will work around one area. You'll be running with speed. In the middle area, jumping for distance, and in the final area, throwing with strength. Speed activity 1 is called tag and turn. Partner A must creep towards partner B, tap them on the back or shoulder, and then sprint away. Partner B must turn around as quickly as possible and chase them back to the start line. Speed activity 2 is called sneak past. Partner A stands facing away from partner B. Partner B wears a bib on their hip, sneaks past them and tries to sprint to the finish line without partner A spotting them, chasing them and stealing their tag.
Okay, so yeah, Dan, thoughts on that? I mean, I'll just throw something in there just on that last game. I'll just play it again actually with Chris in his own. Chris don't mind us, I'm sure he don't mind us watching, showing this one. But if you think about the traditional teaching of like sprint starts as well. So I think about when I first started teaching, it was very much like all the kids on the line, get your hands in a certain position, you know, very, very didactic. If you look at this specific game here where the person on the right is going from a low to high position, there's also an object involved as well, where Chris on the left-hand side there is having to almost reach for the object and then turn and go. So there's a little bit of sort of reaction time. I think for me, this is like sort of the chains and links bit, Dan, in terms of where we're starting to make connections between that tag and turn game at the start, and then how we're trying to really layer the learning, which I know Steve's going to talk about in a minute, in terms of then that progression to a movement towards what athletics might be perceived to look like as it moves on. What can you just pick up on that in terms of like construction of the learning theme itself?
Yeah, so in the first one, that's our speed, distance, strength learning theme. So it's a year 5-6 learning theme. The speed elements there, we've had the 2 games of tag and turn and sneak pass, and just looking at kind of that explosive reaction power, sort of getting away quickly based on like a reaction, something's happening. So we've been tugged, we've then had to turn and run and chase. Again, that sneak pass, as soon as you see that person creeping in your eye line, you're chasing and getting after them to try and get the tail. But again, we're looking at kind of, we mentioned someone in there in the chat mentioned around like sort of gamifying athletics. Like this is like a way to gamify and play games that can develop what's going on. We don't need to have, like Paul mentioned, like 15 children on a start line. Let's do a start on your marks, get set, go. We race to the end. Right, next person, next 15 people go, or however we set up the lesson. It's like actually the pairs are just doing this, and look at that video there. They're all just in their own little areas. They're all self-starting. They're all looking at how they can do this, and the scope of development within this is absolutely massive. I saw somebody at an event do it as where they rolled a ball through the legs. As soon as they saw the ball, they had to then turn and chase, and the runner couldn't move until the person turned round. And so there's so many different ways we can look at like starting, how that looks to them, how we can look at kind of progressing that on from different starting positions and where they are. So in the video from Harrow where we had a kneel down, it could be going laid down, it could be seated down, looking at kind of explosive power to get up and then running as quickly as possible, but kind of really thinking about just opportunities there, that it isn't just the need of let's look at running in terms of just timing, or let's look at running just as like mechanics of running. Like, let's look and think about like how we can break that down. Let's gamify this up. Let's think about what this means. Like, give children incentive to chase somebody else is always a good way to get them to run quickly, rather than just against a stopwatch or against a clock, and looking at developing it that way.
Real, thanks, Dan. Steve, just to sort of close the loop, because this is obviously something you're studying at the moment with your PhD, just in terms of your thoughts so far and where this starts linking from a theoretical perspective as well.
I think with not just with athletics, but any activity area, this pyramid is particularly pertinent, isn't it? Just in terms of, we can't expect children to be competing in athletic events unless we've developed fundamentals of movement and fundamental movement skill. And what we see, or what we often see, is athletics lessons targeted at probably the fundamental sports skills to sport-specific skills level. And what we need to do is ensure that we've developed the absolute fundamentals of bounding, hopping, jumping, throwing at a really early age, and not just thinking it's exclusive to Key Stage 1. We had this discussion on Friday. It's not exclusive to something at Key Stage 1 and early years. These fundamentals need developing throughout the primary age group, if not beyond, particularly when children are growing and when they go to high school and the changes to the body. So it's something we always need to be mastering and developing. And so what I would urge people to do is, when you're delivering your athletics-based units, is to really focus on the fundamental movement skills and fundamentals of movement first. And this highlights it particularly well. And this is just a handful of them. It's not a list that we could have shared. We could have shared probably another 5 or 10 of the fundamental movement skills here. So we've colour-coded object control, locomotion and stability. In terms of posing the question to you all, how often are these revisited across the year? So when we talk about mastery in our curriculum, ultimately what we plan for in mastery is mastery of fundamental movement skills. So we ensure that these are revisited across the year in units that perhaps you wouldn't expect them to be mapped out against, but there will be the revisiting of hopping or bounding or rotating, particularly running, landing, all these elements that are absolutely vital for a child to have in their arsenal to be successful in athletics. We just need to ensure that they're revisited across the year on a regular basis. Not by saying revisited across the year, I don't mean through your athletics-based units. I mean through any unit that you're delivering. We need to ensure that these are being mastered, revisited on a regular basis to ensure success and ensure development. So the question I suppose I'll be posing to people is, in short, how often are you revisiting these the fundamentals on your screen? And I'll say this is just a select. What is there, 7 on there? There could be a lot more that we could throw in there for athletics, but it's how often you're revisiting them, and that's what we'd urge people to be considering, is in your curriculum, mapping them out to say, right, in half term 1, we're going to be covering throwing, hopping and rotating. We need to make sure that's revisited again pretty soon, so where can we put it in half term 3? And then all the revisiting of these fundamentals will result in probably a summer term delivery in athletics and allow them to be more successful, rather than it being just an isolated visit to these activities and these skills.
Real, thanks, Steve. Let's have a look at game number 2 and we'll pick up a conversation.
Strength activity 2 is Ghostbusters. One child will throw a ghost bib up into the air, with the other being the Ghostbuster, using one of our types of throws to knock the ghost out of the air. Keep swapping over roles and experimenting with different pieces of equipment and the different types of push, pull and sling throws to try and be successful. It is important again to connect each time with your partner to find that level of challenge that is right for you. This can be done by adapting the tasks by using the step model. During your review time, you could discuss things such as the different techniques used? Were you able to explore and find one which worked really well for you, whether it is in running, jumping or throwing?
So Dan, just give the sort of the rationale around the construction of that task then, where I know there's some things there that have come out in terms of what the connections are, but what's the line of thinking in terms of the progress that the children can make with that activity?
Yeah, so it's a throwing based game, a throwing based activity. Again, gamifying the element of throwing. So we're not just getting children to stand on a line and do some push throws, getting them to do some sling throws, or like let's get them to gamify it up a little bit. They would stand there all afternoon doing this game if we'd let them. Like what they could do and create from that would be brilliant. Looking at kind of distances. No, think about right now we're using a different type of throw. What's that going to look like? Can I go further back, closer? What's that going to be? How do I throw the ball? That might be different to throwing the javelin. That might be different to throwing the kite or the smaller ball. Looking at how we can utilize different throwing techniques for different pieces of equipment, but doing that in a gamified way. And then thinking about, can I look at the trajectory of that throw? So if I'm throwing that bib up high and I'm thinking like I'm going to aim and throw a bit higher or further, what's that going to look like when I need to throw? How am I going to get myself, my body? And we can do that as teachers when the children engage in that activity. We don't need to stand 15 people with a javelin on a line. Let's talk through technique. Let's talk through exact things, right? Let's throw, go collect, bring back. Let's set these children off playing this game. Let's go play some Ghostbusters, like in your pair. Go experiment, go change your equipment, swap it over. Let's play it. As we're doing that, we can do that teaching, then we can allow that to happen. We can go and explore and ask those key questions around the techniques they're using, what they're finding which work, which piece of equipment are they sending further to hit the ghosts that were further away, or whatever it is that they're kind of exploring. It allows that to happen in what we do. It doesn't just become that same old traditional, we're going to do a javelin lesson today. Everyone's only going to throw a javelin. We're only going to throw it in this way because that's how a javelin should be thrown. It's like, let's explore a little bit more. Let's find techniques. Let's do a little bit more of that exploratory learning. And then we can start pigeonholing or whatever we need to certain specific bits of equipment. If we feel one works better than the other, we can start exploring that a bit deeper. And it can look then a little bit more like what a traditional event could look like based around that piece of equipment. But again, just allowing that option to explore different techniques, what works well, the power needed to send it for different distances or different heights, etc., and what they do.
Yeah, I think again, links in the chain. Just a couple observations from my side as well is I know one of the key words in this unit of work is trajectory. So if we're talking about trajectory and wanting to release an object at a higher trajectory, more towards sort of 45 degrees, like traditional sort of terminology, then I think there's a bit of problem solving for the children. Then, like, how high do we throw the bib? How close do I stand so that the person throwing it can get that? So when we talk about holistic, it's not just feeding them the information and them just regurgitating information we've given them. I think the children then have got a process to go through cognitively to try and solve those problems as well. And talking about links in the chain, there's a really good graphic that I saw a couple of years ago around sort of overarm throwing and how, if we can't get children throwing any type of object consistently overarm, then the link in the chain breaks in terms of when we're asking them to do something more traditional, like an overhead clear in badminton, or we're asking them to throw javelin in a more skill-based way. That then becomes a bit more problematic if children haven't had repetition of being able to experiment in different ways. So I think those are some of the observations from me as that was playing and you was talking there, Dan, and hopefully sort of the cogs are turning for people in the call as well about how this might look in your context, which is obviously important. We all work in different contexts, but just be thinking again, how might I use this with my staff, or how might I use this myself to deliver in the lesson? So yeah, let's go on to the next game because I'm conscious of time. We'll skip through that. This is one of my favourite athletics-based games that I deliver currently. I think this is such an engaging game. The kids love it. So yeah, have a quick look through this, and we'll have another brief discussion around the game.
In distance activity 1, the focus will be on jumping for height. Hold out an object such as a hoop for your partner to jump into and out of. If they are successful, you can start slowly raising the height of the object to challenge them to jump even higher. activity could be adapted by holding up objects such as foam noodles or javelins. With this, the children could run up and slowly raising the height of the object to challenge. The activity could be adapted by holding up objects such as foam noodles or javelins. With this, the children could run up and jump as high as possible, touching the object at their maximum height. Distance activity.
Okay, Dan, yeah, just some more information then on that. Again, just I know it's you that's constructed that. So yeah, what was your line of thinking with that activity?
Yeah, just a different way to look at it as well in terms of, although we use the word distance, that actually within our jumping that we might do a lot of jumping for height, and that jumping sort of that power element of the jumping. Now, what's really interesting is when they play games like the hoop on is that very initial first jump, they can run up and they can start thinking about what does it mean to like run up and jump and land, and is that better, is that worse? But then when they're in the hoop, they've really got to think of that power from legs to get in and out of the hoop to go. Again, just a really fun, engaging, gets them to gamify up that jumping element. It doesn't need just to be like stand on the line and jump. Let's see how far we can jump, measure it. Let's gamify it up to try and do something a little bit different. It allows the children, again, just to sort of develop that wider sense of themselves in terms of that confidence is quite a big one. You might see when people are holding hoops, that confidence barrier initially is a bit like unsure, uncertain. There's like a block there to try and jump over. But actually, the more they do, that confidence building over time, the more times they jump in, gets loads and loads more confidence out of the children to really go and explore what they're doing. No, we can go really deep into technical in terms of like arm use, in terms of legs, in terms of how they're holding themselves, in terms of leg position, how that looks. Really positive bit to now this bit is like the landing as well, of like sticking the landing of when they get in the hoop and really having real clear focus on that stability of body, which if we take away this as sort of a wider sense, like how much of a brilliant link is that to something like a gymnastic based activity? So we're thinking around like jumping, landing, being really still on our landing. Like this isn't what we frame as an athletics type event or activity, but can be much wider used, that thinking that actually we're developing stability and landing, as well as the jumping skills that can then go across other things. Bring it into like netball, jump, land, receive a ball, jump down, land, and be ready to then pass or to be able to move. Same like goalkeeping or those types of activities. That can become a wider activity to use, not just in that athletics based one.
And then just links to this, Dan, in terms of sort of like knowledge and skills organisers. This is part of the sort of the teacher notes that comes up, and the key vocabulary I was talking about there. You can see at the bottom of the screen there. So in reference to the learning theme, speed, distance, strength, you've got things like acceleration, speed, pace, range, length, measurement, etc. Just a quick overview, Dan, of what this actually means practically for teachers and coaches delivering, and why we've put this into the resource.
Yeah, so obviously the three bits there were three pillars of progression from kind of Ofsted. Now we always say we don't want to just tick Ofsted boxes or anything like that, but just it really aligned for us in terms of the Ofsted's three pillars, just really aligning what we were doing in terms of our move, solve, connect. So we have our masterful mover, our skillful solver, our confident connector, and just really clear understanding of them through that unit. What are the children going to know based around your teaching and your delivery, and what are they going to know how to do? So there's that real clear development of the knowledge through the procedural declarative knowledge through the unit that's going to take place. And again, that can then progress on through. So what comes before that, and how is that going to build on to this now that we're going to get to by the end of Key Stage 2 and then beyond? But again, just really important for us is that why we develop this is when we see knowledge organisers across the PE landscape, loads of it is based around that physical competency, and it's based specifically around areas of like learning of games or athletics or dance. Whereas like this, we're looking at a little wider picture. So yes, there is that move element to what we're going to know and show and what we do, but how are we going to look at that skillful solver, what we're going to know in terms of solving, and how we're going to be able to show that in what we do, how we're going to develop through our connection with others, what are we going to know, and how are we going to show that in what we do as well. So just again, just creating that well-rounded, holistic child that actually there's going to be knowledge and success in multiple areas. that yes, a child might not be able to physically show that they are the best javelin thrower or the best triple jumper, but actually there's more to that. They might have really good ideas about the different types of jumps that use. They might really have a clear understanding around what jumps are best to use to get distance or to get height, or the throws they use for different equipment. They might really be good at setting personal challenge and really good sort of opportunity to work with other people or coach or develop. That has, again, just wide ranging across the whole of PE, that isn't just a focus on the physical, that we go beyond the physical. We look at those solve and those connect elements as well to make it a well-rounded holistic piece.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. We've got a couple of minutes left, everybody on the call. Steve, I just thought it'd be quite apt that you sort of just share the potential direction of travel and how this might impact the curriculum moving forward as well. Because I know there's nothing certainly set in stone, but there's a movement, particularly from AFP and their sort of relationship with the DFE over what the curriculum might look like in England in particular, and then how that might impact sort of international colleagues as well. So just briefly, how does this link with where the curriculum could be moving over the next sort of couple of years?
Well, pardon me. So yeah, the future direction, or the proposed future direction, as FP have put to the DFE, is very much a non-sport specific approach, and that would also fall into the athletics. So there will be learning context, and one of the learning contexts is competitive and cooperative games and activities, and that's where you probably start to deliver the type of activities we've seen here today. So yeah, one of the questions Jamie's put in the chat box was around where does this lead to in terms of when can you apply the fact that you've done that jumping, the throwing, and the jumping, throwing, and running. When does it get applied into another unit or into activities? And obviously, we have to introduce that element of competition within that, and that does feature in this unit, doesn't it? But
yeah,
it will look different in terms of a curriculum. Will no longer be a list of sports. It will not be 6 weeks of football, 6 weeks of athletics, 6 weeks of handball. If the proposals go through, and the proposals have been back and forth with the DFE, and the DFE certainly seem to be aligning to what API are saying. So in terms of athletics, these type of activities would fall into one of them learning contexts rather than it being a unit of athletics. So yeah, anyone delivering the English national curriculum, it's just something to factor in, that activities, as we perceive them in terms of the traditional sense, start to look like what we've seen today. Start to look at covering these, developing the fundamentals as we talked about earlier on through a range of activities, rather than it being through, right, we're just going to stand on the line, we're all going to have a javelin, we're going to have a go, see how far we can throw it, write it down, and then move on to the next one. It's going to look very different, and as we know, particularly the three of us, we've all delivered this unit, and it's being delivered right now as we speak in schools across the country and across the world, and it's an unbelievably engaging unit for the children, and that's what it's about. So we need to, that may spark curiosity to want to do athletics more. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, the traditional approach is inspiring children to want to do it more. But yeah, the curriculum is changing, so it's just something to keep on your radar as to what it could look like in your setting, your context.
Good, brilliant. Steve, Dan, thanks a lot. Been great to listen to you both. Colleagues on the call, we are live again next Monday. As I said, we're going to look at striking and fielding. We're going to dive into that a little bit. So the webinar next week is called Aim, Strike, Retrieve. Again, same script. You can join at 8:45 or at 15:45 GMT. If you're new to the content or you want to find out a bit more, there's a QR code on the screen now. Welcome to have a look at that. We've got a free trial available as well that you can go on to and have a look at. Basically full access to everything for 14 days. You're welcome to sign up for that. But yeah, hopefully from my end, this is always my sort of closing gambit, is hopefully from this morning you've just taken one thing that you can actually go and apply in a lesson. And I think that's the critical thing. You know, we can talk about policy, we can talk about methodology and pedagogy all we want, but ultimately it's got to make an impact on the children we're engaging with on a daily basis. So fingers crossed you've taken something from this morning, or just challenge something or confirm something that you can go and apply in your own setting. Thank you for attending. We'll get the recording out to you as well. And as I said, we'll get the email reminders out to you regarding next Monday's event and the third one as well. But yeah, thank you for your time. Great to see some new faces and some familiar faces on the call. Have a great day and have a great week. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, everyone.